This is the ROS Developers Podcast, episode 65. The ROS Developers Podcast, the ROS. Oh, okay, let's go with the real thing.
The ROS Developers Podcast, the ROS Developers. The ROS Developers Podcast, the ROS Developers.
Hello, ROS developers, and welcome to the ROS Developers Podcast, the podcast that gives you insights from the experts about how to program your robots with ROS. I am Ricardo Tellez from The Construct, and this is the first podcast episode of the year 2020. So here we are celebrating this first episode, but also we are celebrating that we have been here with you in this podcast already for 2 years. My God, already 2 years doing this podcast. And so we are entering in this year 2020 on the third season of the podcast. Very excited and very happy to be here on this, and we are going to keep doing it. So let's continue with this podcast. And that is why today, I would like to dedicate this episode to all of you, to all the listeners of the podcast. It is thanks to you that are listening there that we can keep doing this podcast, because thanks to your support, to your comments, to your shares in the social networks, that our podcast has a reason of being, because you are finding it useful, and that's why we can keep doing it. So I really enjoy, for example, when I attend different events around the world about robotics, and then I meet people that tell me that they are followers of the podcast. I'm super happy to hear that the podcast is useful for you. Super happy. And so basically that's the main aim of this podcast, to be useful, to be entertaining, and to provide you with some useful information about ROS and about robotics, about how to program your robots. Today, what we are going to hear here in the podcast is a review of the whole 2019. So it's going to be a short episode, and we are going to see some stats of the podcast, and so you can have an idea of how is it going around the world with this podcast. We are going to see which episodes were the most listener ones, which platforms is for the people to listen, which are the preferred platforms to listen for the podcast, and what can we say about the audience, some information. And so all of that is what we are going to be talking in this episode. But as always, before going into that, let me remind you that we have created at The Construct a ROS Online Academy in order to learn ROS and to learn robotic subjects related to ROS. So it's an academy that it's called the Robot Ignite Academy. And it contains many subjects to learn about ROS. But what I would like to talk is about the ROS learning path for beginners. And this path, we kind of guide, without any kind. So we guide, actually, the beginners from zero knowledge until knowing what you are doing proficiency in ROS. So we start by teaching you Linux and Python for robotics, in case that you don't know, and then we continue with the basics of ROS concepts that are required for you in order to create ROS programs. Then we conclude with some other courses that teach you how to build your own robot and how to ROSify it, physical robot, and how to add ROS control, the DFs, the URDF, and so on. And apart from that, I wanted to tell you that we have launched this week a live course that we are going to deliver in Barcelona in Spain. And it's a special live course because it's not online, it's live, it's on the site, on the city of Barcelona. And we are going to teach how to program robot manipulators with ROS, of course. So it's a course is a 1-week course that we have created in collaboration with Robotnik Company. And this is going to be a live course, as I mentioned, and we are going to teach you how to make a mobile manipulator equipped with cameras, an arm, and wheels, of course, to move around a warehouse and do the typical pick and fill task that a warehouse robot is supposed to do. So we are going to practice with a real robot that is called RB Kairos. It's a robot from Robotnik, and we are going to learn how to create a complete application from zero. So it means that we are going to do navigation, arm control, the object detection, behavior of the robot, and also we are going to include a web interface. So the creation of the web interface that will allow to easily control the whole robot in this environment by non-experts. So if you are interested to attend, it's very limited amount of seats available. So if you are interested, then check out this webpage. It's called masteringros.com. You can find the link also on the show note. Okay, so having said about that, let's start with the stats about the podcast. So the first thing that I would like to share with you is that we are publishing the podcast in 2 main platforms. The first one is iTunes. That is basically for the people who are in the Mac world. Also for people in the Windows, of course, but most of the people are people that are using an iPhone, for example, or an iPad. Then for the people who is not in the Mac world and they don't like this world, then we are publishing into a platform that is called Stitcher. And it's basically used by people who are using Android devices. You can get the links to those 2 platforms, and in order to subscribe to this podcast, so you can get the links on the show notes. There is one link in all the episodes. We are publishing those 2 links. So in the show notes, if you go there, you have a link there where it will bring you to the proper place in your phone or even in your computer where you can subscribe. Then that's the main. Those are the main platforms where the podcasts are listed. But also during the last year, the 2019, we decided also to publish the podcast in 2 other platforms in order to see what is happening. So we started, for example, publishing the podcast on our YouTube channel. So if you go to our YouTube channel on YouTube, then the official channel of the Construct, you will see that there is a list there of videos that are the ones related to the podcast. So at present, we are publishing only the audio. So there is no visuals, there is no video in those podcasts published there. So you will see only the logo of the podcast and then the audio. But we plan to improve this in the close future so you can see the people that is being interviewed. We'll see. And then the second platform that we decided to publish along this year is Spotify. So it's very surprising that in May the 2019, Spotify launched a podcast service. So I think that is a very intelligent move from Spotify. So it's going to capture all those listeners of podcasts in the Spotify application, because then you only need to have one single application, which is Spotify, and in order to listen to the music and to the podcast and so on. So most of the podcasts in the world, they are already in Spotify. That's amazing. And of course, ours is also there. So we are publishing also in Spotify and YouTube. Then what else I want to share with you is that the amount of listeners per episode that we are having. So by the end of 2019, we reached an average number of listeners of 1,022 listeners per episode. That's by the end of 2019. That's a lot. We have double what we had in 2018. So in 2018, by the end of 2018, of the first year, we had an average of 473 listeners per episode. Okay, so now that's the ones that we have in 2019. Our goal for the 2020 is to 10x that number. So multiply by 10. So we want to have 10,000 listeners per episode by the end of 2020. That's our goal, okay, for 2020. Then in YouTube, we have around 170 visualizations extra per podcast episode. So then that's the average. But there are some very specific episodes on YouTube that they reach the double that. So they have around 350 visualizations. Just a very specific ones. So I challenge you to go there to our YouTube channel and check which ones are there. So the very basics ones that I'm going to list also here in a few seconds. Then, so that's for the visualizations in YouTube. And then for Spotify, we at present, we have just very few visualizations. So I don't know. It's around 40 visualizations per episode more. So it's very small. I don't know if it is because people is not used to listen to the podcast on Spotify, or because, I don't know, the people who is listening to the episode is more on the, they don't conceive about listening in Spotify. I don't know. What we have seen is a clear tendency into growing. So the number of visualizations per episode is growing every week in Spotify, but very, very slow. So we'll see, because it's still very early from May that they have started the service of podcasts in Spotify. So we'll see this year. 2020 is going to be decisive. It's very important in order to see what is the tendency for that. Then what about the top 5 episodes more listened during the 2019? So the episodes were the following. First one is episode 43, which is about how to start learning ROS. So this is a hot topic that a lot of people is looking for it. And then this is the first, number one is by far the most listened episode. Then, and second is episode 57, which is about using NVIDIA Jetson with ROS. That was a very funny episode with Raffaello, and we enjoyed a lot. During the episode, I have had a lot of fun, but also it's a very interesting subject for people about NVIDIA and ROS. Then on the third position, we have episode 56, which is about ROS Slam Toolbox. And that was also very interesting and dense episode about the ROS Slam Toolbox. And it's some tools about for doing navigation, better navigation with ROS. Then on the position number 4, we have the episode 39, which is about using the ROS with the Anki Vector robot. You know, this small robot that looks like a character of a Disney movie. It's very nice and complex robot. Small but very complex. So then it's the episode where Henri is describing how he ROSified that robot. And probably you know that this company has closed. But recently we got some news indicating that there is another company that bought Anki, and they are going to try to get it back alive again, the Anki Vector. We'll see. We don't know if it's going to work with ROS or with the normal system, with the original system inside. We don't know, but we'll see. Then finally, we have the fifth position. We have episode 42, which is an episode. It's about how ROS is developed. So I interviewed Tuli Food, which is the main developer of ROS at the Open Robotics company, the company that develops ROS. And he was explaining the ins and outs of the development of ROS, how they decide the names, how they structure the releases, and the future path of ROS. So it's quite interesting. So I highly recommend you that you go back and check those 5 episodes, starting by this one, number 5. Then, what about another idea I wanted to share with you is about the countries. Yeah. So about the countries, which countries are listening the most? So we have a top 5, and the first one is the United States. And of course, the United States is a big country, but also they have a very large, they have a culture of listening to podcasts more than any other country, at least in my personal experience. I have moved around many countries, and in Spain, in United States, I always find people that is listening to podcasts on a daily basis. In other countries, when I explain to them about the podcast, many people, they don't know about even what is a podcast. That's my personal experience, okay? That may explain those data. But what we know for sure is that the podcasting is increasing a very fast pace. In the last year, for example, in 2019, it has increased a lot, and it's becoming a trending topic. So I expect to have more, so a different list of countries by the end of 2020. So I mentioned number 1 is the United States. Then we have India in the second place. Then we have Germany, and on the third place. Then on the fourth, we have South Korea. And then in the 5th, we have Japan. And yeah, so those 3, they are very far away from the percentage of United States. So, but they are still the top 5, let's say. They have no much difference between those top 5 and the others that are below. For example, number 6 is Spain. It's almost the same as in Japan, or the UK is in number 7, also almost the same, and also China. We have all those have more or less the same amount. Okay, then what else? I want to talk about the comments and feedback that you are providing to the podcast. So, for example, we like a lot the comments when you are saying about that how nice is the podcast and how much do you like it. That's very cool. So we like those comments very much. But also we do like the criticisms, and so don't stop yourself from sending us criticisms. Okay, so for example, we got a lot of complaints about the sound of some of the episodes. And that is right. So the sound quality has to be perfect. And this is now my first priority for the podcast in this year, to improve and provide you in every episode the perfect sound quality. I also got complaints about the frequency of publication. Because our podcast, it is supposed to be weekly, but sometimes it takes longer. So sometimes there are 2 weeks that there is no episode there. So I'm going to work on delivering an episode every week on every Monday. So that's the rate that we are going to work and to fight this 2020. So those 2 are the main goals to improve the quality of the podcast for this year. So we will push hard to accomplish this. And yeah, but do not hesitate to let us know if we are failing in any of those. Just let us know, and then this is going to serve as a push also to make it nice. Then we are not receiving any complaint about the deepness that we are dealing on the different subjects that we have on the podcast. What do I mean? I mean, so at present, I don't know if you would like us to deal more technical details about the subjects, or you would prefer that we say just the opposite. Do the opposite, is to have less technical details and go more about the story and the anecdote around the ROS development of the week that we are dealing. So we are not receiving any comments about that. Please, I would like to know about this. If you think that we should go deeper into the subject or lighter or more on the surface, I don't know, give us some feedback. What do you think about this? Then what else? So before finishing, we are going to finish. As I mentioned, today is going to be an easy, a short episode. So I would like to remind you that our goal for this year is to increase in 10x the number of listeners. So how can we achieve that? We can achieve that only with your help, only if you help us. So how can you help us? Well, if you like the podcast, please help us then reaching that goal by recommending to your colleagues. Recommend to your colleagues, hey, I heard this podcast is quite nice because of this, because of that. Then I recommend you that you listen to it. And also to give us 5 stars on iTunes or Stitcher. So if you do that, then people will be easier for them to find the podcast when they are looking for different subjects. And at present, we have only one feedback in Stitcher from Pito Salas. That is quite nice. So you can go there. I challenge you to go to Stitcher and see the comments that are there. We have no feedback on iTunes. So we need to have that in order to improve the perception of the people of the quality of this podcast. So please give us a review. We accept also criticisms if you want. So I'm not afraid of the criticisms. I mean, I strongly believe that criticism is a source for improvement of it. So go ahead, tell us what you don't like, and then we'll do our best to improve the podcast. I need also that clarify that we love your support messages, okay, like the one of Pito Salas. And so feel free to send us also those nice messages to us. So then you can contact us on the in order to do the feedbacks and so on. You can do it directly on the applications of iTunes or Stitcher. But also, if you want to send me a direct message to myself, you can do it through my email, which is rteles with double L and ending in Z, rteles@theconstructsim.com. I will put the email on the show notes, don't worry. And final thing, so it's that we are interviewing people that we find that could be interesting for the ROS developers community to learn about their work, their opinions, their ideas, whatever. So the thing is that you can propose yourself for an interview. So remember that the goal of the podcast is to provide useful content to the ROS developers out there. And they need to learn about the latest technologies of ROS, which ones they should apply to the project, how can they make best usage of this, different techniques, different packages, different approaches. So if you think that your development is interesting, it's going to help the ROS developers up there, you can propose yourself for an interview, of course. So here there is no filtering of the only filtering, I mean, it's by the subject. If the subject can provide it's useful for the ROS developers community. So let me know. So you have my contact details there, and I will be waiting for you on this. And guys, that's all for today. As I mentioned, leave us a review in iTunes telling us what you think about the podcast and what you would like to have. And thank you very much for your 5 stars in iTunes. So see you next week on Monday with a new lesson from the experts. And until then, keep pushing your ROS learning.
The ROS Developers Podcast, the ROS